Hello and welcome to Unit 2, where we're going to be talking about multiplication here at Soflex Math. Today we're going to talk about the power of 10, which is going to be linked into our previous place value unit, where we talked about expanded notation as well as representing place value number values. So what we're going to do is, by using our multiplication facts, we're going to be able to do some quick multiplication, and in our next division unit we'll also be able to do some quick division. So when we look at one of our facts, for example, so if we had a fact like 4 times 3, easy enough. So 4 times 3 is 12. So what we're going to be looking at, though, is we're going to be looking at how we can just add zeros in the problem and how that relates to adding zeros in our answer. And it just makes multiplication really quick. So instead of 4, what if we had 40 times 3? All right, so 4 times 3 is 12 again. And then if we have 1 0 over here as a place value, we're going to have 1 0 here. Because 3 40s equals 120, just like 3 4s equals 12. And we can continue this pattern. So we're just going to call this the power of zeros, because you can see how easy it is to do some multiplication by just doing the facts and then adding zeros. So what happens if they both have a 0? So in this case we have 40 times 30. So 4 times 3 is still 12. And this time we have a total of 2 zeros, which means we have to have 2 zeros in the answer. So notice how they have to match up. So no zeros, 1 0, 2 zeros. And we could keep this going. So we could even make this bigger. So let's do a 400 times the 30. So we all know 4 times 3 is 12. And this time we have 1, 2, 3 zeros, which would give us a total of 1200. Okay, so let's try another example with some different numbers. And then I'll also show you one where it gets a little tricky, because if our answer ends in 0, I'll show you how that works too. Okay, so here in yellow we have 2 more examples. So the 8 times 4 on the left is going to be just a review of what we just did. But then the one on the right, the 8 times 5, we'll show you how that is a little trickier, just because our answer is going to have a 0 to start. So when we count up our zeros, it might be a little bit tricky, but I'll try to explain that for you. So just going through our facts. So 8 times 4 we know is 32. Okay, and then we can add zeros. And let's even do it a little different pattern than our previous page. So same thing. So 800 times 4, 32 with 2 zeros. All right, and I want you to pay attention here to what happens. So we have 80 times 40, and that's going to be the exact same answer as above. So look at this, 2 zeros, 2 zeros, 1, 2 zeros, 2 zeros. So if you look, 800 times 4 is the exact same thing as 80 times 40. So if you had 4 piles of 800 or 40 piles of 80, you'd have the exact same amount of whatever you were counting. So just kind of notice how that pattern works. Okay, and now we're going to compare it over here on this side. So we know that 8 times 5 is 40. But see how the answer is 40, it already has a 0, so sometimes that gets a little confusing. Because now, watch how this changes a tiny bit. So remember, we said 8 times 5 is 40, so we just write our answer down. And then, well, we can't be confused with, oh, 1 0, 1 0. No, I haven't accounted for that 0 yet, because I just did 8 times 5. So this answer is actually 400. So notice how this pattern is a little different than this pattern. So 8, so even if we did 80 times 50, so 8 times 5 is 40, plus 2 more zeros, that answer is actually 4,000. So look how we have no zeros but 1, 1 0, 2, 2 zeros, 3. Why? Because our multiplication fact already had the answer of a 0 in it. So 8 times 5 is 40. So think of another example that would follow the same pattern. Basically any of your 5s. So if we did 4 times 5 is 20. Okay, it's going to follow the same pattern. Okay. Same thing if we did things times tens or times hundreds. it's going to have that extra 0 in there as well. All right, so along with this, I'm going to actually go over two or three different games that really just work with multiplication facts. So this is more background knowledge and things that you should have already memorized. But if you didn't, here's some fun games. Instead of just studying flashcards or a multiplication chart, I'm going to teach you 3 games that you can use just to practice your multiplication facts, which will obviously help you with this multiplication unit. So let's take a look at the first one, our first game here. So our first game here is called Countdown 300. And if you look, it's kind of working on the distributive property, which we'll talk about later in the course when we talk about properties. But basically what that means is that we're going to do what's inside this parentheses first. So the 4 plus 5, we're going to do that first. And once we get that answer, then we're going to multiply. So in this case, I already wrote the answer for you, but just so you can follow along. 4 plus 5 is 9. That answer, 9 times 3, is 27. So the way this is going to work, you're going to have 2 red dice that you're going to roll, and those 2 red dice you're going to add together. Once you have that answer, you're going to roll a blue dice. When you do that, you're going to multiply whatever the blue dice says. And then, as we say, count down 300. You're going to start at 300, and you're just going to subtract. So my answer was 27, so I subtract 27. And then I'm going to get that answer. Then my partner will do the same thing on their board. So each player has their own 300 to start with, and they'll roll their dice for their own turn. So as you play, you're just going to keep going through this until you get down. The whole reason or the point of the game is to get down to exactly 0. So when you're playing the game, you're going to continue rolling, getting answers, subtracting, subtracting, subtracting. But at some point, you might get down to, for example, what if you get down to 24? Okay, well, if you rolled this, you can't subtract 27 from 24. So that's where you would lose your turn. So even if your partner is way ahead of you, don't give up. Keep rolling, because it's a little bit about luck about what you roll. But you could catch up, because this person cannot subtract. You can't do 27 from 24. So if you go into negative numbers or you go below 0, that's when you lose your turn, and you just have to go back to 24, and then you'll roll the dice again. So you can only subtract until you can still subtract. Once you can't subtract anymore, then it's going to be a lost turn. So if I had any combination of answer up here that's above 24, I would lose my turn. Okay, but I could still subtract down to get to like a 4 or a 6 or whatever I could subtract. So each of you take turns going back and forth, rolling 2 red dice, adding those, multiply by the blue, take that answer, subtract from 300. And then when you subtract here, you're just going to keep going. So when I subtract here, so 300 minus 27, we're going to take that answer of 273, and that's what we'll just keep subtracting from. So our next round, when we roll our dice again, we're going to subtract from 273. We don't keep going back and subtracting from 300. 300 is the starting point of the game. Once again, this game and the directions and the game board is all in your resource book at the end in the game booklet. All right, so let's look at our second game. So this game is Flex 5. It's kind of like the old game Connect 4, where what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to get 5 in a row, either vertically, up and down, sideways, or diagonally. So you'd have to try to make a row of 5 in a row. What you're going to do here, it doesn't really matter what colored dice you have, but you're going to roll 2 dice, and then you're going to add those answers together. So 3 plus 5 would equal 8. So I'm going to kind of think of my multiplication facts, and these are actually called multiples. So we're going to say count by 8s, 8, 16, 24, and so on. And you're going to see if you have any of those, and you can only do 1 per turn, because for 8 I could do 16, I could do 24, I could do 56. There's going to be a bunch of answers available each time you roll, but you can only do 1 per turn. Okay? So you and your partner are both going to fill out this with any numbers between 10 and 99. So any double-digit number. And just to give you a hint, you're going to want to avoid something called prime numbers. So a prime number is a number that you can only multiply itself by 1. So for example, 41, the only way to get to 41 is to roll a 41, which we can't on these dice. So you do not want to use any prime numbers. But your job is to try to get 5 in a row before your partner. So in this case, let's say one of my multiples of 8 is a 24. So I think I'm going to go ahead and mark off one of those. So you can just make an X or whatever you want to do. Okay. And then my partner is going to roll, and they're going to mark off on their game board, not yours. And they're going to put down whatever they got. Okay, let's say I rolled a 2 and a 3, so I have a 5 as my answer. I'm going to try to find anything that has a 5. So remember, we're trying to get 5 in a row. So this might be a good one to choose because that's in that row. 20 would be a good to choose because that's in that row. 40, it is a multiple of 5, but not so much because that's not going to help us connect 5. So I might do this one. All right, because now I'm on my way to get these 5 in a row. So anyway, you keep rolling, taking turns, marking off on your own board. Whoever gets 5 in a row first would be the winner. So this one is called Flex 5. Once again, it's also the directions and the game board are in the back of your book. All right, and we have one more to share here for today. There are some more games, but we'll do one more today. Okay, our third game here is called Family Pyramids. And for this game, what you're going to do is you can roll either 1 or 2 dice. And what I would do is I'd have either 1s or 10s place value for the dice when you roll them. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to complete some fact families. So a fact family, for example, would be 3, 4, and 12. Because 3 times 4 is 12, 4 times 3 is 12, 12 divided by 3 is 4, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. So you're trying to get those fact families to make your pyramid. Which means sometimes you're going to want to roll 1 dice to get a single digit number, and then sometimes you'll want to get 2 dice to try to get a double digit number. So let me give you an example here. So maybe our first roll on 1 dice is a 3. All right, so we get a 3 in there. Okay, so we can think, well, now we can do any facts of 3 right now because I haven't rolled again. Let's say my second roll was a 7. Okay, so I'll put that in here. So now I know it's 3 times 7 equals what? Well, 21. So I'm going to roll 2 dice, and I'm going to try to get a 2 and a 1 to put together to get to the answer, or the amount of 21. So when you roll the dice, you're just putting them together. You don't have to add or subtract them. All right. Or you could roll back or work backwards. You could get a 24. So roll 2 dice first, get the kind of the answer, and then let's say you rolled a 4. So now you're thinking of the fact family the other way. 24 divided by 4 equals 6. All right, or you rolled a 5 and then you rolled an 8, so that would be an answer of 40. So this is why, as with one of the previous games, and I'll put a link on there at the bottom, where you might want to buy some 10-sided dice, because that way you can use zeros. So you can roll zeros 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So you can roll all of the place values. All right, so the first person to fill up their pyramids here will be the winner. So if you roll the dice and you can't fill one in, that's when you lose your turn, then your partner gets to go. So it's whoever, you take turns, but whoever can finish up their board first. So those are a couple of games that you can play not only right now, but throughout the lesson. It's really working on your facts, because you are going to need facts for the rest of this unit, because we're going to be working on multiplying. And quite honestly, most of the 5th grade mastery lesson, you need to know your facts, because we'll be using them with fractions, with area, with volume, with all kinds of the skills that we're going to be working on. So once again, ask questions if you'd like, and we'll see you in our next lesson where we tackle some multi-digit multiplication. Thanks for watching Soflex Math.